My name is Marissa Quinn, 34 years old. The text came in like a paper cut you don't feel until you see blood. Stay away from Christmas, Dad wrote, the words dry as kindling. And then, like she had been waiting behind the door with a confetti cannon, my sister Jessica reacted in the family group chat with a laughing emoji. That stupid cartoon face giggling over a message that felt like a lock clicking on the other side of a door I had been knocking on my entire life. I didn't cry. I didn't rage text. I didn't even show the phone to the only person whose opinion matters. My son upstairs, 13, headphones on, laughing at something I could hear but didn't understand. Instead, something inside me cooled to glass. It made everything sharp and honest. I typed one line, then I'll stop touching the bills. No flourish, no threat, just a weather forecast. They didn't answer, at least not right away. The chat, usually a constant static of memes and bragging and blurry casserole photos, kept buzzing like nothing had happened. Jessica dropped a TikTok of a woman doing that hip roll everyone pretends is ironic. Dad's thumbed somewhere between the emoji and the silence, the door inside me shut. I opened my laptop and the accounts. I shouldn't know by heart, but do. The things I had put on autopilot because it hurt less to do it than to argue about whether anyone else should. Jessica's student loans, auto pay off. Her car insurance, remove my card. Dad's truck insurance, gone. Internet, water, electricity. My card detached like a tether cut in space. Streaming services, log out, log out, log out. I didn't tremble. Fingers learn not to when they have spent years typing other people's passwords. When I finished, the house hummed the way a house does in winter, air moving through vents, the fridge dreaming. I made tea because that is what people do when they want their hands to have something to do besides shake. My phone lay face up on the counter, as if it could feel me watching it, daring it to flash. 3 weeks earlier, because I am the sort of person who thinks gestures can become bridges if they are wide enough, I bought Jessica a used Toyota Corolla, silver, clean, low miles, $12,000 from a friend who had a daughter leaving for grad school and a good heart for a sister situation. The title, already signed over to Jessica, sat in a folder on my kitchen table under a giant velvet bow I had ordered, because somewhere inside I am still 7 and think a bow makes a miracle official. For Dad, I'd ordered a gold watch. Simple, classic, not gaudy. I had the back engraved, "To the best dad." I held that little phrase in my mouth at the jeweler's, the way you hold your tongue in your teeth to see if it belongs to you. I spent an hour choosing the font. The man behind the counter asked if it was for a milestone. A repair, I almost said, but smiled instead. Stay away from Christmas, laughing emoji. I went to the garage, flipped on the light, and looked at the Corolla. It looked back at me with the blank, spotless gaze of anything that doesn't know it's about to be used as a weapon. I took photos, 3/4 angle, interior, odometer. I took a picture of the watch in its velvet box, the engraving shimmering like a secret under the kitchen light. Then I dropped the images in the family group chat. No caption, no explanation, just proof. The effect was immediate and bigger than I expected. The chat, my permanent secondhand auditorium, went silent. Not a silence that says no one saw, a silence that says everyone did. Aunt Linda broke it first. "Marissa, is this real?" Uncle Mark, "You bought them a car?" My cousin Nina, "Wait, what is going on?" Then Mom, whose silence has always been the mirror I've checked my emotional hair in. "I'm so sorry." That one almost cut through the glass. From there, the thread fractured into 2 conversations. One public and one I could feel happening in a separate chat without me. On our side, curiosity slid toward anger, like a chair scraping across tile. Linda, "Why would he text that?" Mark, "When did this start?" Nina, "What did I miss?" Jessica tried to pivot. "This is out of context. Marissa's being dramatic. He didn't mean it like that." Dad tried a new script. "We never asked for those gifts. She does things like this for attention." I set my tea down too hard and watched a wave lap over the rim. For once, I did not swallow it. I opened notes, scrolled to a document I keep for myself so I don't accidentally gaslight myself into forgetting. Then I started to type in the chat. Not feelings, not metaphors, numbers. Last 12 months. Jess's student loan auto pay, $318.12. Car insurance for Jess, $142.12. Dad's truck insurance, $189.12. Water, power, internet, variable, average, $321 month. Dentist copay for Jess, $240. Car repair for Jess, $876. Emergency vet for Dad's dog, $310. Grocery runs, 7 times, average $120. Dad's property tax shortfall, $600. Streaming services everyone uses but I pay, $58 month. I hit send, then another message. I asked for thank you a few times. I was told I was overreacting. The chat went still again, but I could hear the hiss of something burning off. Linda, we've noticed the pattern. We just didn't realize how much of it sat on you. A private ping from Nina. We always knew something was off. I'm sorry we didn't say anything sooner. Mom called. I let it ring out. When she called again, I answered and said nothing. She arrived an hour later with a pie she didn't know I don't like, a reflex more than a dessert, and sat on my couch without removing her coat. We watched the light move on the wall, like it was late afternoon in a movie that would end with a hug. They're going to try to spin this, she said finally. They'll play the victims now that everyone's watching. I know, I said. She set the pie on the coffee table and folded her hands on her knees like she was bracing for weather. You're not alone in this anymore, she added, and her voice broke on the word alone like it had been in her mouth a long time waiting for an exit. The truth is, I had not planned any of this like a general with maps and pushpins, but the truth also is that you can plan a thing without admitting you're planning it. My document titled Aftermath had been growing for months while I told myself it was just contingency. Switching off autopays felt like cutting vines off my ankles. Posting the photos felt like turning on the lights and letting people see the mess we had been living in without me. They'll beg by morning, Mom said, and she was right. At 7:42 a.m., Jessica sent a multi-paragraph apology. It read like it had been written in a car, and guilt, and the Notes app. She said the laughing emoji was about something else, that Dad's text looked worse than it sounded, that I was blowing things up when we could just talk like adults. She never said the one sentence I would have believed. I was wrong. 10 minutes later, Dad sent his. It did not try to excuse. It deflected. You take things too personally. You always have. Family drama doesn't need to be public. Not. I shouldn't have said that. Not. I hurt you. What bothered him most was that the audience he prefers had expanded. And then the relatives began tilting. Aunt Linda stopped being gentle. She listed small humiliations that had lived in her memory like pebbles in a pocket, the birthday dinner I paid for. Because you're doing well, right? The Thanksgiving pie Jessica mocked while Dad laughed. Uncle Mark, who barely texts anyone, messaged me privately. I remember the car thing last summer, the way he bragged it was taken care of, like he did it. I'm sorry. I hadn't intended to unload my receipts. I thought the photos would be a period at the end of a long sentence, but when the throat opens, the truth pours. I added the $12,000 I'd paid for the Corolla, the nearly $2,000 watch invoice, non-refundable engraving, attached screenshots of every bill tied to my card. The held breath in the thread felt like the moment before a verdict. Car's getting listed tomorrow, I wrote. Watch is going to auction. I'm done pretending we're a family when it only goes one way. Jessica read it. Dad read it. No one replied. Silence, but honest for once. By afternoon, I had the listing drafted and a meeting set with a local appraiser whose shop smells like metal and old clocks. Mom sat on the couch, quiet, then finally said what I already knew. They're going to come here. I pictured Dad's performative calm, Jessica's chin quiver, the choreography of contrition they do when reputation is on the line. I pictured Facebook posts about forgiveness and life is short. I pictured the relatives who were already on my side looking for a tidy arc to place over us, like a bow I hadn't bought. Let them, I said. That night I watched a movie with my son, both of us leaning into the dark like it might hold. He asked what we were doing for Christmas, and I said, we're going to make it feel good. He nodded like that was a plan he could live with. Upstairs, the boxes I'd kept for years, old school assignments, tiny handprints, felt heavier and more real than any velvet bow on a car. When I turned off the TV, I stood at the front window and watched the driveway not fill with headlights. Not yet. I set the phone on the counter, face down, and breathed in the kind of quiet that arrives when a house is finally yours. Somewhere inside that quiet, I felt a shape I hadn't recognized before locking into place. Power, but not the kind that shouts, the kind that simply stops saying yes. They thought the car and the watch were the end of it. They had no idea those were just the first place stones on a road I had already started walking, and though I didn't know it then, there was a reason Jessica had laughed so easily, so cruelly, the night she helped lock me out of Christmas. A reason she kept glancing at the Corolla in the photos like it wasn't just a car, it was a lifeline she believed she was owed. I didn't know it then, but I could feel it like a weight in the air before rain. I didn't sleep much after that, not because I was waiting for a reply. Those had stopped meaning anything, but because once you finally tell the truth out loud, your brain rewinds every moment you swallowed it. I lay there in the blue wash of my alarm clock and remembered receipts I hadn't sent, phone calls I'd taken in stairwells so my son wouldn't hear, the way my father's voice always softened by exactly 1 octave when he needed something. By dawn, the ledger in my notes app had grown its own backbone. I added dates, bank, last 4 digits, confirmation numbers, because there's a kind of shame that evaporates when you point at proof. At 8:03 a.m., Aunt Linda texted privately, "If you want me there when they come, I will be." I stared at the screen, surprised by how quickly my eyes stung. Nobody had ever asked to stand next to me when the performance started. "Thank you," I wrote. "I'll let you know." She sent back a little knife emoji, which made me laugh in the soft, guilty way of people who have spent too much time being polite. By mid-morning, the group chat turned into a courtroom without a judge. People were careful at first, like they were walking barefoot in a kitchen after a glass breaks. Then the story started to take a shape I didn't have to force. My cousin Daniel wrote, "I remember when your car broke down and Jess posted about God provides, and then you showed up with your credit card." Jessica replied with the kind of eye-roll emoji you can feel through the screen. "Oh my God, Daniel, stay out of it." I didn't answer her. I posted screenshots instead. The text from Dad asking if I could float the property tax just this once. The Venmo memo that read half of dinner when he had picked the restaurant. The time-stamped payment to the dentist minutes after Jessica's panicked call because she couldn't chew. I scrolled back to last spring and found the picture of a bouquet Dad had posted with "My girls deserve the world," and attached it next to the invoice for the same flowers, which I had ordered because he'd forgotten Mother's Day and asked me to help him out of a jam. "Marissa," he wrote then, a private message that tried to sound calm. "This is not who we are as a family." "It's exactly who we are," I typed back, and felt my ribs loosen like a zipper finally unhooking. The backlash didn't come from strangers. It never does. It came from the people who benefit from your silence. "You're being cruel," Jessica wrote publicly. "You know Dad has pride. Why humiliate him?" Aunt Linda jumped in before I could. "He humiliated himself, Jess. Don't teach your sister how to carry it." Mark added, "I should have said something years ago." Nina sent me a heart that somehow felt like a hand over mine. Every time the chat died, it wasn't because they had nothing left to say. It was because there is a specific quiet that settles when the lie you're sitting on shifts under your weight. I let it do its work. I closed my phone and opened my laptop. The car listing took 15 minutes and 10 years. One owner. Excellent mechanical condition. Clean interior. I hesitated over the price, then set it lower than the market because I wanted it gone quickly, and I wanted to be the one who decided what generosity looked like in my house. I uploaded photos, the ones from last night and the one I took now. The velvet bow still looped like a joke I wasn't telling anymore. The watch I brought to a guy named Martin whose store smelled like old pennies and lemon oil. He peered at the engraving through his loupe, mouth pressed into a line like he was the one trying not to feel anything. "You'll take a loss," he said, not unkindly. "I know," I said. "Sometimes the discount is the point." On the way home, I drove the long way and past the park where Dad used to take us when we were small. I could see him in my head, whistling for the dog, watching Jessica hang upside down from the jungle gym while I tried to figure out how to make a seesaw work without a partner. The memory stung because it wasn't all bad. That's the worst part. People want villains so they can feel tidy. But the truth is messier. Sometimes the person who warms your hands by the bonfire also leaves you out in the cold when company arrives. Back at the house, I scrubbed the kitchen like the counters had said something insulting. My son came down around noon, hair in that half curl it gets when he slept too hard on one side. "You good?" he asked, which is 13-year-old for "should I worry?" I told him we were getting pizza for lunch and a movie later. He made a fist and whispered, "Yes," like we were planning a heist. It struck me then how easy it is to forget your kids are watching. The way you set boundaries becomes the way they set theirs. If all he learned from me was that you don't have to stand in doorways waiting to be chosen, maybe the last decade would scratch less on its way out. Around 2, the group chat flared again. "We're coming by," Dad wrote. "We need to talk face to face." No question mark. No please. My heart thudded in that dull, old way that meant my body remembered being the kid who always had to earn affection on the edge of performance. I put my phone face down and walked to the hall closet where I keep the door wedge and a little notebook with a list titled House Rules. I read it out loud like a lullaby for a different kind of child. They don't come in unless you say. If they cry, it's not your fault. If you shake, breathe out and feel your feet. You are allowed to end the conversation. You do not give back what they took because they're sorry. The wedge went by the door. The notebook went in my back pocket like a talisman I could held onto in case words slid out of reach. At 3:30, Aunt Linda texted, "Want us now?" I typed yes and erased it and typed no and erased it again. I didn't want a circus, but I also didn't want to be the only one in the ring. "Come by at 4, I wrote. She replied, "On our way." The knife emoji appeared again, and I laughed for real this time. The appraiser called at 3:45 to say the watch was consigned and would likely move to a gentleman who collects apologies. I almost told him that was the funniest thing I'd heard all week, but there was gravel crunching in my driveway, and the sound pulled all the humor out of the room. I checked the peephole and saw Dad's truck, Jessica in the passenger seat wearing sunglasses in the shade like a person cosplaying grief. They stepped out in dark clothes that made me think of church more than mourning. Their walk to the porch had that curious gait of guilty people, brisk, then slow, like if they controlled the pace, they could control the outcome. I didn't open the door. I called out through it, "You can talk from there." Dad exhaled a laugh. "Honey, don't be ridiculous." My hand didn't shake when I slid the chain into place and opened it 3 inches. "We will do this my way in my house," I said. He blinked, as if the words didn't fit my face. Jessica held up a gift bag, glossy and limp, with the weight of nothing. "We got you something," she said, voice pitched to sweet. I could smell the cheap metal through the tissue paper, could see in her eyes that she'd thought the gesture would flip a switch back on. "Keep it," I said. "You'll need it more." She opened her mouth, but then a second car door slammed. Aunt Linda was a bright block of color at the end of the walk, Nina a half step behind. They didn't even look at Dad's truck. They looked at me, the way people look at firefighters in movies right before the last wall falls. Linda didn't wait for an invitation. She stopped 1 step down from the porch and crossed her arms. "We're not doing a show," she said calmly. "Say what you came to say, and then listen to what you need to hear." Dad's jaw tightened around the old pride. He has a whole vocabulary that lives in his eyebrows, and right then they were spelling out a slur of disappointment. He started anyway. "We took things too far," he said flatly. Jessica chimed in, "We've had a rough year." The words felt pre-chewed. The kettle clicked behind me, the sound Mom makes when she wants a conversation to have a beginning and an end. And I understood that I had more people on my side than seats on my porch. Still, I kept the chain firm. "You sent a text that said, 'Stay away from Christmas,'" I said. "You laughed. I canceled what I pay for. That's the only math here." Jessica laughed once, small and sharp, to show she could. Then her hand slid, without permission, without thought, to the slight curve of her abdomen. It was the tiniest thing, a press, a glance downward like a flinch disguised as emphasis. Nina saw it first. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" she asked. Not cruel, just surgical. The porch held its breath. Jessica's chin lifted, then dropped. Dad looked at the railing like it had betrayed him. I felt something click that had been rattling since last night. Of course. The car was never a car. It was security. It was narrative. It was the bow they wanted to tie on a choice they knew would make more sense to people if there was a prop in the driveway. "I'm happy for you," I said finally, and I meant it in the complicated way you mean good fortune for someone who doesn't know what to do with it. "But I'm not giving you a car. That's not how motherhood works." Jessica looked at Dad then, and in that glance I saw the whole family play unfold, the baton handoff, the cue, the music swelling for the kneel. He did. He actually bent one knee on my porch boards. Like contrition was a choreography he could muscle memory his way through. It wasn't grand, it was clumsy. Maybe that's why I believed it enough not to slam the door. I didn't tell him to get up because I wanted him small. I told him to get up because I was done with theater. "I forgive you," I said, and watched relief flood and then stall when I added, "That means nothing changes for me. It means I'm not dragging this behind me anymore." He nodded, and for the first time in years, my father looked not like the man who always knew exactly where to stand in a family photo, but like someone trying to figure out where to put his hands. They left with their gift bag, their dark clothes, their silence finally honest. I stood inside the door and felt the house settle like a pulse lowering after a sprint. Linda squeezed my shoulder hard enough to leave half-moon marks. "Proud of you," she said. Nina wiped under her eye with the edge of her sleeve like dust had just this moment learned to fly. That night, my son and I watched a heist movie and split the last of the pizza, and when he asked why I kept checking the window, I told him, "Because some doors you lock twice at first until your body learns you're safe." He nodded and went back to his game, fingers flying like birds. I looked at the car listing on my phone again and thought of hands, his, mine, the ones that would someday grip that steering wheel for the first time because someone's mother could finally afford to say yes. The knock did not come. Not that night. Which is somehow worse and better at once. Suspense makes the air taste metallic. But even that taste is better than the old flavor of being the family wallet everyone keeps in their back pocket until the check arrives. Morning came pale and exhausted, the kind of gray that feels like it's waiting for something to happen. The house was too quiet. My son had left early for school, the dog hadn't barked once, and my coffee tasted like I'd made it from nerves instead of beans. I'd spent the night replaying the scene on the porch, Dad's kneel, Jessica's flinch, the half-swallowed silence that followed Nina's question. Pregnant. The word had echoed through the walls long after they left, like it wanted to make sure I heard it properly. I didn't know what to feel. Pity, anger, vindication, all of them tangled together like bad Christmas lights. I'd expected them to beg, to make excuses, to gaslight me into forgiving them. But not this, a baby. Another generation, another fragile excuse to keep the cycle going. I tried to tell myself it wasn't my problem, that their choices had finally caught up to them, but the truth was heavier. Beneath the layers of betrayal and exhaustion, I still felt something I hated, responsibility. By noon, my phone was buzzing again. Aunt Linda, then Mom, then Nina. "Are you okay?" Linda's message read. I shouldn't have said it out loud, but she deserved it. I typed back, "You didn't do anything wrong," then deleted it, then typed it again and sent it. At 12:37, Mom called. "They'll be back," she said before I could even say hello. "He's embarrassed. He won't let that be the last word." "He already said the last word," I told her. "I forgave him." "You said it," she corrected softly, "but he didn't hear it." I looked out the window at the empty driveway. "Then he'll have to learn to live with silence." She sighed. "That's the thing about men like your father. They can't. Silence makes them feel small." That evening, I listed the Corolla. I lowered the price again, just enough to make it irresistible. Within an hour, I got a message from a woman named Clara. "Single mom, 2 jobs, my daughter starts college next month," she wrote. "We've been looking for something reliable but affordable. This looks perfect." Something about her tone disarmed me. She didn't haggle, didn't play games. She just said she'd bring cash and gratitude. When she arrived the next morning, I watched her step out of an older sedan that coughed with every breath. She looked younger than I expected, tired in the way that women get when life never pauses for them. Her daughter climbed out of the passenger seat, a girl barely 20, with nervous hands and the same hopeful eyes I used to have. They walked around the car slowly, reverent almost. The girl whispered, "It's beautiful, Mom." Clara smiled, eyes glassy. "Your first car," she said softly. "Be good to her." When she turned to me, I handed over the keys and said, "She's yours now." She blinked. "You're sure you don't want a deposit first?" "No," I said. "I trust you." She hesitated, then hugged me, tight, unexpected, like she knew what it cost to let go of something that once meant love. When they drove away, I watched the silver Corolla disappear down the road until it was nothing but a speck of light. I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I felt hollow, like I'd just buried something. That afternoon, I boxed the watch too, the one engraved to the best dad. The appraiser, Martin, called. "Sold," he said. "For a fair price, all things considered." "All things considered," I repeated. The phrase felt strange in my mouth. The next day, I wired part of the money to pay off the last of my credit card balance, the one loaded with years of family emergencies. The rest I kept aside for my son's Christmas. He didn't know about the money, of course. To him, all this chaos was background noise, the static between school and homework, the occasional whispered argument between adults. That night, as he sat cross-legged on the rug playing a video game, he asked, "Are we going to Grandpa's for Christmas?" I froze. He looked up at me with those same soft brown eyes that used to melt me when he was small. "I just want to know so I can tell Jacob if we're here or gone." I wanted to give him something simple, a yes or a no, something that didn't need a backstory. "We're staying home," I said finally. "Because of Grandpa?" he asked quietly. "Because home should feel good," I told him. He thought about it for a second, then nodded. "Good," he said. "Then can we make pancakes on Christmas morning?" "Yes," I said, "extra syrup." He grinned. "Deal." By the weekend, the family chat had gone silent again. No holiday plans, no sarcastic memes, no Jessica flooding it with filters and fake cheer. Until Sunday night. A message from Jessica popped up. "I don't know what to say anymore. I know you hate me. I just want to start over." Then another. "You were right about Dad. He's trying to pretend everything's fine, but it's not. He barely talks to me." Mom's keeping her distance, too. I don't even know who I am without everyone looking at me like I'm perfect. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I almost replied, but I didn't trust it. I'd seen too many of her apologies evaporate the moment someone else came to her rescue. I put my phone down and went back to wrapping presents. Small ones, mostly practical. Socks, a new hoodie for my son, the console he didn't think I could afford. It wasn't about the gifts. It was about reclaiming the joy of giving without strings attached. The next morning, a delivery truck pulled up. The driver handed me a small box. Inside was a cheap knockoff watch, the same color as the one I'd had engraved for Dad. "No note, no return address." I laughed. It was such a Jessica move, guilt disguised as irony. Mom texted me 2 hours later. "They're spiraling. Your father's angry at the relatives for taking your side. Jessica's been crying all week. Don't let it pull you back in." "I won't," I wrote back. But I could already feel it trying to pull. A few days before Christmas, Aunt Linda invited me to dinner. "Just us," she said. "No apologies, no pretending." When I walked into her house, the smell of cinnamon and roast filled the air. There was laughter, not polite laughter, but the kind that shakes shoulders. Nina hugged me at the door. "About time you stopped feeding those wolves," she said. "Still learning how to stop," I admitted. Linda poured me a glass of wine and smiled. "Then start by eating with the people who see you." The table wasn't grand, just 6 of us. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider sitting at it. I didn't have to measure every word, didn't have to scan the room for approval. Halfway through dinner, Linda leaned in and whispered, "They'll try to rewrite it. Give it time. But for now, you've won." I didn't feel like a winner, just free. On Christmas morning, my son ran into the living room and stopped short when he saw the gifts stacked under the tree. "Mom," he said, eyes wide, "you didn't." I did. He tore into the wrapping paper until the new console appeared, gleaming in the light. His joy was loud, unfiltered, the kind I hadn't heard in years. He hugged me so tight I almost lost my balance. "This is the best Christmas ever," he said into my shoulder. And for the first time, I believed him. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I stood in the living room and looked at the empty space where the Corolla had once been parked, where my father's watch had once sat in its box, where all the things I used to give away had once waited to be taken. For years, I thought generosity was love. But that night, I realized boundaries are too. The phone buzzed on the counter. A new message from Jessica. Just 4 words. "I'm really scared, Marisa." I stared at it for a long time. It was the first honest thing she'd ever said. The message from Jessica sat unread for 2 days. Not because I didn't see it, I did, over and over, but because I couldn't decide what kind of sister I wanted to be anymore. The kind who rushes to fix, or the kind who finally lets people feel the consequences of what they've built. On the 3rd morning, the mail arrived. Among the bills and circulars was a small, cream-colored envelope. No return address. Just my name written in Jessica's looping handwriting, the kind she used on birthday cards when we were kids. I hesitated, thumb running over the seam like it might burn me. Then I opened it. Inside was a single folded card. The words were simple, written without her usual theatrics. I'm pregnant. Dad won't talk to me. Mom's trying, but she's tired. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know who to be now that no one's clapping for me anymore. I miss you. I'm sorry for everything. I just wish we could go back. No demands, no guilt, just fear and confession. I set the letter on the counter and stared at it. I'd waited years for an apology from her. Now that it was here, I didn't know what to do with it. That night I showed it to Mom. She read it silently, her eyes softening with each line. When she finished, she folded it carefully, like it was something fragile. Whatever you decide, she said, placing it back in my hand, let it be for you, not for the girl you used to wish she was. She was right. For most of my life, I'd been trying to love the version of Jessica I made up, the sister who might one day look at me and see more than convenience. But that person never existed. The one writing this letter? Maybe she finally did. A week passed. No more messages, no more family chatter. It was almost peaceful, the kind of peace that feels temporary, like the world holding its breath. Then Mom called one evening, her voice low. They're on their way, she said. Who? I asked, though I already knew. 15 minutes later, the sound of gravel crunching filled the driveway. I didn't move at first. The kettle clicked in the kitchen, the dog shifted by the door, and my heart thudded like it was rehearsing a line I hadn't learned yet. Dad's truck came into view. He parked slower than usual, engine running a moment too long, as if cutting it off would make everything final. Jessica got out first. She was heavier now, not just from the pregnancy, but from something weightier, like regret. Her shoulders curved inward, her steps careful. Dad followed behind her, older somehow, the confidence drained from his posture. When Mom opened the door to greet them, she didn't say hello, she just stood aside. You know where she is, she murmured. They found me in the kitchen, wiping down a counter that didn't need it. I didn't look up right away. When I did, it was like seeing ghosts that weren't sure they belonged in daylight. Dad spoke first. Marissa, he said, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Can we talk? I didn't answer. I just gestured to the table. They didn't sit right away. Jessica hovered by the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. She looked nothing like the sister who'd laughed at my expense a month ago. She looked like someone who had finally learned that being adored isn't the same as being loved. Dad took a slow step forward. I don't have an excuse, he said. You were right, about everything. We took from you because it was easy. We treated your effort like oxygen, something we thought would always be there. He swallowed hard, eyes darting to the floor. I'm sorry. The room went still. Jessica moved next, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I just needed you to know I'm sorry too. I thought I could keep everyone happy if I kept you small, but all I did was make myself smaller. And then, without prompting, without theatrics, they both lowered themselves to their knees. No speech, no crying, just the sound of skin meeting tile. I froze. It wasn't the sight of them kneeling that stunned me. It was the quiet sincerity in it. They weren't begging. They weren't performing. They were surrendering. For a moment, I saw us all the way back at the start. Dad, larger than life, teaching me to ride a bike, but never looking back to see if I fell. Jessica, the shining one, always first at everything, always forgiven for it. Me, somewhere in the background, watching and waiting for a chance to be enough. And now the scales had finally balanced, not through revenge, but exhaustion. Get up, I said softly. They looked uncertain, like they needed permission. Please, I added, this isn't about humiliation. I don't want that. Dad stood first, his knees creaking. Jessica followed, wiping her cheeks. I forgive you, I said. The words came easier than I expected, not because they earned it, but because I didn't want to carry the hate anymore. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't for them, it was for me. We sat at the table after that, 3 people pretending to remember how to be a family. Dad complimented the house. Jessica asked about my son. I answered in one-line sentences, polite but not warm. They stayed an hour, long enough to finish the tea Mom brought, long enough to exhaust every safe topic, long enough for me to feel the edges of peace begin to form. When they finally stood to leave, Dad hesitated at the door. I don't expect you to come back, he said, but I hope one day you'll visit. I didn't respond. He didn't push. They walked to the truck slowly, almost tenderly, like they knew the weight of the moment. When the engine faded down the road, Mom turned to me. "Are you okay?" "I am," I said. It wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough. That night, my son padded into the kitchen in his socks, hair messy from sleep. "Are we ever going to Grandpa's house again?" he asked. I crouched beside him, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "Maybe someday," I said, "but not right now." "Why not?" "Because home should feel good," I told him. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded, like he understood more than I wanted him to. Later, when the house was quiet again, I sat by the window with a cup of tea gone cold. Outside, the sky was heavy with snow clouds. The reflection in the glass looked almost like another version of me, the one who used to beg to be let in, replaced by the one who had finally learned she didn't need to. I thought of Jessica's letter, of Dad's apology, of the car now in someone else's driveway, the watch on a stranger's wrist. Everything they took from me was gone, but somehow I felt full. Because what I had left, the peace, the boundaries, the laughter of my son upstairs, was finally mine. The door wasn't locked, but it wasn't wide open anymore, and for the first time in my life, that felt right.